First of all, thank you very much for the invitation and the very interesting input, Michael, from you. I do want to put one part at the very first thing. I'm newly elected to the Bundestag, and I'm a member of the Digital Committee coordinating the Greens there, and a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And why is it I am in foreign international digital policies invested? This is and therefore also, of course, touching the topics of AI. This is because I believe it's a necessity to have a working business environment in Europe also, and mainly for AI innovations. And not only because I believe it's the next big thing, there's a lot of money in it, and it's important to have that part of the value production chain, but also on a geopolitical scale. I believe to have European innovation, value-based innovation, it's a key to enable privacy for us in Europe, but also worldwide. And I would say, to make the topic very big in the first place, this is a key for functioning, for a working democracy, and it's a human right. So coming from that angle, I would like to well, focus on the relevance of artificial intelligence, but also, of course, on the political approach and the green approach, but also the approach of the new government. As I said, I believe we must use the innovative power of AI for the major challenges of the future. The climate crisis and the energy efficiency question, but also the demographic change and the shortage of skilled workers are, I would say, hard facts why we in Europe, but also mainly in Germany, rely on working AI innovation. And when I'm talking about the demographic change, it's maybe important to know, or nice to mention, that we have a big wave of the baby boomer generation retiring in the next few years, and they've done things well, sometimes differently, often in a very good way, but not so digitalized. And we don't have enough people coming afterwards to just do the things the same way. So we need to have higher efficiency at certain points. And I believe we can only have that through, in the first place, a strong digital approach in general, but also to just, into intelligence, and therefore AI applications. And as I said, it's about the digitization of our Western and European privacy standards. So when I say about Western privacy standards, this is important, an important topic on a geopolitical scale again, because there lies a general distinction between European and US approaches to, well, only the Europeans call it regulating the digitization. The US would probably not use the word regulation that much, but there lies a different interest. And I think this is important to acknowledge, but on the other hand, I would say it's also important to still work together, because only if we have a coherent approach, or at least a coherent approach with acknowledging that our differences are, after all, only small differences, and we can have a joint approach to promoting green mobility, energy efficiency, and also increase the efficiency of public administration with our shared values, then this gives a very good business environment and some kind single, I put this in quoting signs, single market opportunity. I will now focus on our political or policy perspective. And of course, if I put the focus on AI and big data from a political perspective in our upcoming projects, there's a very important part that we had a lot of talks about it, I would say, in Germany, but the last federal government did not develop a very far forward-looking AI strategy. So I would say there was a lack of strategic goals, and it was far too little Europe-orientated. And this orientation towards Europe is central because, as I said, in German in the very beginning, I believe alone Germany cannot achieve the competitiveness that a cooperative Europe could. And only with European partner countries we can promote the collaboration of a strong European research location and environment. And this also, of course, accounts for the area of AI. And let's say, luckily, as a strong feeling European citizen, I say luckily, the European Union is now approaching the topic on itself with the AI Act. So the regulation at the European level makes sense, and it's urgently needed. And this way, brand AI in Europe can be created, which I believe would be a very good USP also worldwide. But fundamentally, it's important for us that regulation ensures a strong development environment and reflects our European value. So that's sometimes hard to keep in balance. But startups and SMEs must also be able to comply easily with the regulations. And at that point, I'd also like to have a quick advocation towards some sandbox approaches. I believe strong regulation, but also clear regulation can help and is sometimes necessary. But I do believe that at certain points, to have regulation which is fitting for scaled up big business models does not make sense if you want to just try out an innovative idea. So that's my strong advocacy for sandboxes. The regulation under the AI Act must be designed in such a way that Europe is secured as a strong development location, and we have the strong environment here. And I therefore think it makes sense to make regulation dependent on risks. So because too strict regulation for AI applications that are not questionable, that can be ruled out, and the data economy can thus not suffer any negative effects from regulation. And I believe that's key. It's a good thing to have a strong approach on high risks ideas and innovations, but don't affect small or not that dangerous ideas with that. In principle, when AI is used, it's central, and I'm not saying this only from a policy perspective, but also from a political perspective, meaning that I believe if we want to have the public opinion with us, it's important to have a trustworthy AI. And this includes, and I think it's debatable, this might be a bit of a green approach, but it includes the priority of human action and control. The privacy and data quality management needs to be high and good, but also diversity and non-discrimination and fairness needs to be included. And what I would push the most is transparency. People need to be able to understand, why did I get, going back to the example of the newsletter, and I have a very, very fitting proposition I get by a newsletter, and I wonder, why did that happen? I need to be able to understand, or at least third parties need to be able to understand, why was I registered or sent that way? And I mean, that even gets more important if we talk about AI approaches in the human resources departments, for example. It's important that if people ask the question, well, why was I sorted out, you can actually explain that. Maybe some two thoughts to the current circulating approach of the AI Act. I would say it's a strength, as I mentioned, that the regulation is based on different risk levels, and it's a good thing that we have a ban of social scoring systems in there. But one part, I believe it's a weakness, not mainly so much touching businesses, or it's rather a mistrust against states using AI. I think the AI Act is missing a clear rejection of automatic face recognition, mainly in the public spaces. Every face recognition that is on the grid, I believe it's a high danger application, and I think it would be a good idea to reject that clearly. But as I said, that's mainly a mistrust against states rather than businesses. On a German level, with the new government, and we try to claim that we are, and I would also, of course, say that we are a very future-oriented and government that is now trying to have the digitalization used for its advantages and not so much for its dystopian discussions we might have around a lot, which are important to have and important to listen to, but it's important not to forget the very good things we can have on the topic of digitalization and also with the AI. So I think it's important we will strengthen our investments in AI, quantum technology, cybersecurity, distributed ledger technologies, robotics, and other future technologies. Also in open source, it's a very important part for us. But we also wish, I'm saying this from a German perspective, more investments in joint European research. Like, for example, the LS network in the Cyber Valley in Baden-Württemberg, it's in Stuttgart, Tübingen, so it's close to where I live. I think this is a very good example, and we should strengthen such things. And another topic, and I'm working also, and that is to enable the data access. So at this point, I might give you some insights on our priorities, and I would be happy to discuss with you further approaches, or some of your questions maybe. Maybe also getting a bit more into the question of deepfakes, which I believe is a very good example for not so much the question of how good is AI or how can it be applied, but for scaring people.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tobias. It was a pleasure to hear your thoughts. Maybe 2-3 different questions from different topics. So as you mentioned, face recognition, do you think this is one of the biggest dangers, or what is with drones, with autonomous weapons and stuff? Where do you see the biggest threats, what we see in Europe? Because the potential threat is also always seen as reason why not to do anything at all and wait.
I believe that face recognition is a big problem. If you have face recognition on the grid and it's shared, it's very hard to delete any certain kind of information on that one. So we had to in Afghanistan, when the US lost their face recognition devices, and those are off the grid devices. There was a really bad thing when the Taliban got hands on that, and they could actually see and use the data set to try to find out who worked for the US. I'm having a feedback now better, sorry. So I believe this is some very high risk approach, and with the question of drones, I think it's very important to distinguish what we are talking about. To have drones, also drones flying with AI application or parts, it's not the problem. It's a huge problem if you have weapons, lethal weapons, which fire automatically. But this is a hard to distinguish, but I would really advocate for that. It's also not about arming drones or not arming drones, but I think there needs to be a harsh line if it comes to firing on based on AI. But not only because I believe it's wrong ethically, but also because this would lose trust in AI if it would happen somewhere.
Thank you very much. Maybe back to now we have an echo. Maybe back to the topic of the German election. Have you seen already things like deepfakes also as problem in Germany, or this kind of trolls and bots spamming the whole thing? Or did you observe in that area a lot, or was it still okay? Because we see in US probably much more of that.
Yeah, but I would also say it's two different things. You have bots and trolls who are amplifying certain narratives, amplifying certain tweets, and therefore having an agenda setting, which I would say is a problem. And this is like gives a wrong agenda setting and can manipulate agenda setting and spread disinformation in general. With deepfakes, I would say currently it hasn't been a huge problem, but it starts to become a problem, and it's a matter of digital literacy, and you have to have very high digital literacy to actually know where's the standard right now, what can be faked easily. And there I would say in general, and this is nothing to do with AI approaches, but in general, it's hard for people to keep track what's currently state of the art, what can be faked easily, what can't. And I give you one example, which has nothing to do with AI. If you give me 10 minutes, I will do a share pick for you, which you, if you are not into politics and not into graphic design, would believe might be authentical from another party or another person. And this is where people we're not being in the internet all the day or are not into digital policies and politics the whole day. They get very easily misled, and I believe this is a problem, but it can be tackled. And maybe I have one kind easy solution, is have an obligation of labeling certain manipulated videos or also pictures. And now you can argue, well, that's hard to keep track. It is, but we have the same with advertisement, and it's responsibility of the creators and uploaders to label it. And if you find out that there is product placement or advertisement in a video, let's say on YouTube or TikTok, and it's not labeled, then it's a violation of the guidelines. And then you have a sanction on that. So I believe this is maybe not solving everything, but it's an easy approach.
I would like to ask you a question. If we would like to trigger innovation in AI, we need data and we need access to data. When it comes to data access, there is a class society. So European-based companies do not have the same access to data as US-based companies have. And I'm referring to Google and Facebook. So there is no data democratization. So how can we as Europeans tackle this issue?
Two things. One is the open data approach in the public sector, and we in Germany, we are now pushing for a data institute, as the British have the Open Data Institute. It's similar. It's not going to be the same. It might have some extra parts as well, but I think this is one important approach. But the second approach is, I believe there's a huge opportunity within the Data Act. If you give actual sovereignty to the user of a device, or the owner of a device, and interoperability also with the data sets, and you as a user are able to decide who you want to share your data with. And this is of course also it's I believe I understand that the GAFAM are not don't like that idea, but I believe it's a very good idea, not only because it gives digital and data sovereignty to the people, to the individual, but also it gives the opportunity, if you have a good idea and if you convince me, giving me my data or the produced data instead of the big company who might develop it, this gives you at least the opportunity to get to the data if you convince me with your idea. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but this, I believe, is how markets should work. You convince me with your idea, and you get me as a customer, or you get my data.